I've been drowning so long, I can't seem to breathe. Lost in my mind, shadows, I can't find relief. Dragged down by the weight of what's in my head. I want to be stronger and rise up instead. Now I've been learning to heal, I've been facing the storm. And the clouds are parted, the weight is gone, and I believe.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. Timekeeping. For any neurodiverse ADHD bunnies out there, and for anybody in general, but especially the ADHD bunnies, this one's for you. Timekeeping is hard. Timekeeping is the reason behind keeping the session to the 50 minutes. Quite a few things around that. First of all, it sets a boundary for the client. It allows the client to feel safe. It allows the client to know how long they're going to be there. Now, this all sounds like, oh yeah, of course it does. But a lot of the time in therapy, if a client is holding on to something that they really don't want to say, or they need to say it, but they don't want to talk about it today. They just need to get it out. A lot of the time what happens is that they leave it to the end of the session, and what we call a door handle confession. It's like they throw it at you just before the 50 minute or the hour, if you do an hour, ends. And that is something that's really, really useful to say, okay, we are almost at time, and I'm just noticing that you just threw that in there. Was that done? You don't want to talk about that today, but you needed me to know. And a lot of the time they'll say, yeah, I've been holding on to that all session. And you're like, okay, got you. So that it gives them that safety to be able to disclose things that they don't want to talk about, but they just need you to know, so that they've almost outed themselves in that way for the next session. That's number one. Number two is that we can feel as if, and I've done it myself, I am a culprit for this, I'll own it, where when you've been trying to get the client to feel comfortable enough to go there, and then suddenly they're going there and they're in it, you think, oh, I haven't got a client, I'll just give them extra 10 minutes. And sometimes that's really useful, but other times you can push the client into too much of the window of intolerance a little bit, where it's like, okay, whoa, I've had enough now. And so that's something to just be aware of as well. I think that's something in a lot of therapists, we don't have an agenda for clients, but when you can see that the client has just got there into that place, you really want to be able to do that work with them and not say, I'm gonna have to leave it till next week. So when you're qualified, if you do give an extra few minutes, that is a personal decision on you. When you're in training, it's different, because it's keeping that boundaried space safe and curtailed. And also, the majority of the time, there is another therapist waiting to come into the room with another client. Another thing that can happen is sometimes if you do give clients extra time, afterwards they start to push, that they kind of, the 45 minutes is up and we're going to 50, and they start a brand new topic and they talk at you, and you're doing all the cues of, we've got to end the session now, and they just, nope, because they're used to you giving that extra time. So I think you've got to be aware of, if you do give extra time, especially when you're new, is to verbalize it as well, to say, I know we had extra time. If a client keeps going over, wanting to go over, bring it into the session the next week. Say, I'm noticing that we're struggling to keep that session in the session time. What's that? What's going on for you with that? Do we need to look at maybe talking about these really important things a little bit sooner in the session? And is there anything holding you back from doing that? Another thing that can happen is you know, a client is picking up things, and we don't always know what's in their process. Sometimes we can think we know, but we don't always know what they're, well, we obviously don't always know what they're thinking. But a lot of the time, if you give a client extra time and then suddenly you don't, they can take that quite personally too, because they can think, well, with that was really important to me what I said, and she didn't give me extra time, or he didn't give me extra time, or they didn't give me that extra time. Do they not realize how important that was? They gave it to me the last time, and so all these different things can take place. But also the other side of the boundary of the therapeutic hour is for the therapist. If you keep going over sessions, you are going to burn out, because that time between sessions, be it, I mean, for me, sometimes I only have 10 minutes, and that is a push. It does take its toll sometimes. Some people have longer, but if you're eating into your recovery, I call it recovery and processing and getting ready for your next client, then what you're doing is you're eating away at your own reserves. You're also eating away at the next client coming in's time, because you're not in a headspace necessarily to be ready and centered and alive again for that next client. Saying this, of course, there are exceptions to all rules, and it's not a rule, it's a boundary. But sometimes we do have to go over session time when a client is in distress, and we need to ground them. I think there needs to be this happy medium where you can't go over session time, or not, you shouldn't be going over session time every time a client is distressed, because sometimes it's really, really therapeutic to allow the client to leave distressed, because the work continues as they leave the room. And if we're going to kind of put them back together and sew them all up, and you can halt and hinder that therapeutic process that you've kind of got going as they leave the room. But what needs to be really, really important is that they need to feel grounded, and they need to feel safe to leave. So there's a very big difference, and you will get a grip on this as you go, but there's a very big difference in leaving a client feeling quite upset and distressed and allowing them to go if you trust the client is safe enough to do so and you've had that conversation with them. If they are not safe enough to do so and you've grounded them and it's still not worked, you need to kind of just get them into a place where they are grounded. Give them some tools. So I always say, this has been a real heavy session on you, I can see that. I talk about the therapy hangover. Don't be surprised if when you leave here you feel absolutely shattered. Be kind to yourself on therapy days. Give yourself what you need. Self-care on therapy days. Anything that makes you feel nurtured and warm, do that. If you feel like we've really scratched at that wound and you've got so much, you don't know what to do with it, write it down. Just write it all down, so we just get it out and you're not holding on to it now till next week. Write it down and keep it for me till next week and bring it back in, or just get it out. So that's also part of some grounding tools, but more proactive grounding tools that they can do after the sessions. What I do with timekeeping, and actually I have to own this because I stole this off my personal counselor because it was just so brilliant. I think this is why she does it. I've just decided this is why she does it. But it was such a kind, subtle way of allowing me to notice that the time was coming to an end, before, instead of her saying, we've got 5 minutes left, we've got 4 minutes left, we're at the end now, while I'm in distress. In those days, very much so, was she just used to take her diary. I'm trying to hold it up so you see it. She used to take her diary and just put it on her lap. That's all she used to do. And I used to know, okay. And then she'd open her diary and she'd pick up her pencil, which I still do to this day with my clients. And that was my sign of, our time's up. When are we going to book you in again? And that was amazing. I think with trainee therapists, we are a lot more respectful of therapists' time and boundaries as well. Not to say at all that clients aren't. Of course, it's not the respect thing at all, but we know these clues or these kind of things of what we do, and I think no trainee therapist wants to be the therapist that pushes their personal therapist boundary. So we're all like, oh, okay, getting back to the whole thing where we look at them as the guru, and they are just oracles of knowledge. But with clients, they don't know these things. They don't know. They may not know why we're picking up the diary. They may not understand the boundary of the therapeutic hours to keep them safe. And so this is where the verbalizing comes in. And time boundaries and timekeeping is something that you can go over in supervision with all different clients so many times. You know, there can also be times where maybe a client doesn't pick up their impact on others and doesn't know how to read other people's language and what they're trying to tell them either, and you can experience that as a therapist, and so bringing it back into the session, and you know, it might, in a kind way, remember, we're not being this critical person that they're used to outside, but I've just noticed that every time we try to end the session, you try to push more. I'm just wondering what that's about. Again, supervision. Okay. Next question. How do I deal with clients that don't return? I think that is something that is really hard when you're a trainee therapist. First of all, because you're very, very vulnerable yourself. You want your clients to stay because you really don't have a lot else to go on in history with regards to, it's not only this, you've had clients that stay all the time. If this client leaves, there's a reason why they've left. The two key reasons is that something within themselves is not ready for therapy, or something in the relationship was not quite right between you and the client. Those are usually the two key things, and we can learn from them. But when it happens to us as a trainee, it can feel awful, absolutely awful. And the second thing, obviously, not in a way that we're pushing clients through to get our hours, but it can start to feel really scary if your clients don't stay. Again, this is where supervision comes in, to figure out case by case what is going on. Because if you are not having clients stay a lot, then maybe there's something to look at in, okay, what's going on within that relationship? Are they feeling me present in the room? What's going on there? Also, it's okay to feel harmed by it. It's okay to feel hurt. You know, I think as you grow and you become more experienced and qualified as a qualified therapist, you do retain a lot more clients, and the ones that don't stay, it sometimes it's like, oh, that's sad, because I really would have liked to have worked with them. But you jump back a lot quicker. When you're training, I think you're in a lot more vulnerable place. So I'd always say, again, and this is what the training teaches us, but be reflective, look at yourself, be willing to look at, not in a critical way, in a, okay, let's find a learning here. What happened? But always remember, it also could not be about you. You know, remember, we work in mental health. We work with people that's lives a lot of the time are turned upside down, and consistency and commitment and commitment on themselves is a really hard thing as well. And so if you're going to take that personally every time, you're going to be battered and bruised. So you need to remember that we work in a profession where those things are not strong points in people's lives a lot of the time. Also, I think when it comes to, this is something that people talk about, but I think it's really important that we talk about it more. When you're working with neurodiverse clients, that can be something, whether you are aware that they are or not, that is something that's in the room. And sometimes weekly sessions or sessions in general can be, especially in person or online, it depends where they sit and how they experience and process things, but it can be very, very, very overwhelming. Same with the whole 50-minute session. Sometimes it's too long. Sometimes they get as much out of a 30-minute session than they do out of a 50-minute session. And I think you need to be aware of this and be fluid. And the more that you can be open to working with exactly what the client needs, how they need it, obviously within therapeutic terms, so that it's still being therapeutically helpful towards them. But that is really important too. And I think that we live in a world now where so many people are neurodiverse and aren't aware yet as well. And so for me personally, I am always aware that there could be a lot more in the room here that's going on that maybe the client's not even aware of, and to just bend and move around them so that they feel comfortable, they feel engaged, but in control. Something that I wanted to talk about as well is a lot of the time, the counseling training, and I think I touched on it in the beginning, because we are on this course and the course is built to bring up so much personal stuff within us, it can feel very, very triggering at times to be on the course with certain people that trigger us, that make us feel lesser, that bring up all these things within us. And sometimes you find that peer relationships on the course can become really, really hard to deal with. I think what's important to know is on the course, you're either going to find your tribe or you're not. And if you don't, that's very normal. There's only a handful of people from my training that I would consider my tribe. And that's okay. And that's nothing to do with the other people at all. It's just the people that I connected with and that I felt safe, according to where I was in life at that stage. And I think as you start to see clients, you can start to become aware that these people are going to be your colleagues one day. And if it feels that you want to stop sharing as much personal information because it's making you feel a bit too vulnerable, at the same time as feeling vulnerable seeing clients, then that's okay. That's okay. I can remember feeling, these people are going to be my colleagues one day in the world. How do I want to be as a therapist? And I want to start becoming that person now on the course. And I started to really hold back in what I shared. But, and this is the big but in a capital, I took those things to my personal therapy instead. Because if you start shutting down, the course is there to trigger you, to get all of that up and to allow yourself to know yourself in the best possible way before you start doing this as a profession. If it doesn't feel safe, it's okay, but don't not look at it. Look at it within your personal counseling. Right, another last one, because I just am aware of how long this video is being, and if you're still watching it, again, thank you. Oh my goodness. I hope it's given you some type of tips or just allowed you to feel human as you start to see your client work. Another topic that I wanted to talk about was about language and about, I can remember when I started, so for me, I'm diagnosed dyslexic and I'm pretty sure I have ADHD as well. Like I say, it's for a future video. But due to my dyslexia, I have always struggled to retain information in a way, so very professional terms, big words, for example. I've always erred on the side of talking to somebody in a language that everybody can understand. Now, the reason why that is with my dyslexia, even though I can recall client sessions like a movie in my mind, my brain does not retain information as easily when it comes to vocabulary, big words. And so I can also remember when we were doing our triad sessions, which if anybody is not a counselor is watching this, You kind of practice on each other. And I can remember not knowing what these words, what to say, except how does it make you feel? I mean, how many times can you say that or nod your head empathetically? You see, here we go. In fact, I think there is a debate on which way is the correct way to say that. But anyway, I'll let myself off. And again, this is where listening to uh, the Laurie Gottlieb book, Josh Fletcher's book as well for the new therapists coming through, or therapists right now, watching programs, learning all of these things, it just helped you to get some more vocabulary around talking in a more therapeutically professional way. But what I want to say is, don't worry about it, because it will come. You will find your own language around how to speak to clients. This is really important. And sometimes you'll have those moments where you're like, listen to me. Conditions of worthing. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's a very basic term within therapy. But again, language, and I can remember learning about this, language is very, very interesting, so a lot of language and the way that we use language can give barriers as well. So, for example, if you feel that you have to be eloquently spoken and pronounce with all these big words and, academic terms, and you can stand the chance of a client feeling very segregated. So many different nuances of how people experience life in the world, and so many different things that have wounded people. So I'm going to give you a very typical example where, my personal opinion is, and I will say this till the cows come home, and I'm really passionate about this. A lot of my passion comes from the fact that I originally come from South Africa. And although I didn't grow up during apartheid, I was born in apartheid. Apartheid was a horrific thing. I'm not going to go into it on this video. You can go and Google it if you don't know about it. If you don't know about it, you really should. But it was the most horrific time, and it brought a lot of segregation, horrific, disgusting, brutal segregation within our country. And I grew up in a time where we began to heal when Nelson Mandela became our president, and the nation began to heal. We've still got a lot of healing to do. There's a lot of wounds, but everybody was set in different classes according to your color, according to who you were, according to everything. And the pain and the trauma that caused in people is just horrific. And again, I'm only touching on this because I feel as if, although we're not living in South Africa, and thank God not in a time that I was born into, but in the world in general, we do not have enough equal representation in the mental health and therapy world. We just don't. Therapy world, a lot of the time is, you will find white therapists, a lot of the time middle class. Yes, thank God. And a lot of the time heterosexual as well. Okay. Thank goodness we are moving in a way that different ethnic groups and gender identity groups are being represented in mental health and therapy, and different economic brackets are being represented in therapy. Okay, we are moving towards that, but there's a whole history behind why that is not the case. Again, for another video, only because it would take me too long to explain it. But basically it comes down to previously disadvantaged backgrounds due to there not being a balanced opportunity for all ethnic, cultural, gender groups. And so you need to be aware of what prejudices you could be representing, even unknowingly, sitting in this therapist chair, and what journeys some clients have had. I'll never ever forget. And this is something that some people may raise their eyebrows at me, but I'm passionate about this. But I'm very aware of my accent, which is a South African accent. And I am very aware of the history that South Africa has against people of color. I was not a part of that. I was a baby when that happened. That is not what my family or who I am represented or supported at all. I just happened to be born in that country at that time. But I am aware, very aware, that when a person of color hears my accent, what else could be in the room? And so a lot of the time, I bring it up. I do. I don't, bring it up straight away. I don't want the client to think, whoa, what the hell's going on with you? But I do bring it up. I do. If it feels it's needed, I say. And I think it's important. I think it's important that we know how we represent to clients as well. And we become humble about that. We become humble about how does it feel as a white woman to be talking about your experience. I know nothing about your experience. Tell me what it feels like to be you. Tell me, because of my privilege, I don't know, but I'm aware that I don't know, and I'm aware of my privilege. And again, why am I talking about this other than because it's important? Because language that we use as well, it can put us onto a pedestal where some clients feel that they are less intelligent, or that we're too professional. There's a big thing about, do we display all our certificates? I mean, for me personally, I don't, because I don't want the client to come in here and be faced and met with my certificates. They don't need to see that for me. And so again, if you do speak more eloquently, that's okay. It's you. It's who you are, and own it. Own it. But maybe just be aware of the clients that you're working with, and maybe be aware to kind of tone it down, or if you're feeling that this client probably doesn't use this form of language and may not be understanding what you're saying. And the other side to this is, if you don't use elegant academic language, then that's okay too. It's okay. So yeah, right. On that note, I think I need to stop because I think that's enough for you guys to kind of digest. And also, I have a client soon, so I'm going to go and get ready for the client. And I just really hope that I have answered from a personal perspective anything that you've kind of been wanting to know, and that it's hopefully been a bit helpful. And again, this is from my perspective. And I'm a person-centered therapist, and I work integratively. So that's how I work and what I do. And there are many other therapists, many other modalities, many other therapist experiences. And so ask the questions on the forums, on the Facebook pages, or if you want to know anything else. Comment underneath this video. Email me questions in. I'll answer them. But find your way of being you. Use your tribe, use your supervision, your personal counseling, your own reflective process. And I wish you all of the best. Okay, guys, till next time.